Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a proud privilege to bring to you the Telecom Leadership Forum being organized by the Voice and Data. And this is an annual forum which we find gets some very interesting conversations. And the topic today, of course, that we have for this session is 5G Enterprise, the next frontier of technology. And a lot of focus is there on Industry 4.0 or enterprises adopting the new wireless technologies which will come about. One is in 5G, but more so in enabling technologies which 5G will make feasible that will help enterprises, build more efficiencies. Now, before we begin, let me try and give you an overview of the current scenario of the telecom sector in India. So the good part is that the really good part is that India is number one globally in the consumption of data. Every data customer is consuming about 13.5 GB of data monthly, which is the highest in the world. Compliments to the Indian telecom sector, both public, private, and the government who supported this, because with the least amount of spectrum, both in access and backhaul, and lots of challenges on rights of way, India has actually managed to deliver to its citizens a network which has enabled substantial consumption and services. In fact, if you see in many sessions, you will be hearing that if there was one sector which continued the country to function both at work or at home or at play, was so superbly amplified and demonstrated in the last 1 year of COVID. Despite the variety of challenges, it was the Indian telecom sector was put through a stress test, and I think it's come out with flying colors. Yes, there were instances of shifting of, let's say, demand for bandwidth moved from urban areas or central business districts to residential districts, and when the migrant workers moved to rural areas. But the good part is that the resilience of the telecom sector was something which has helped this country substantially. And this is one sector which is the underlying catalyst for all other verticals across, whether it's going to be education or health or logistics or sanitation or water supply, water management. So for a country, this is really a sector which needs to be nurtured, which needs to be encouraged and keep an eye on. And, with all the geopolitical stuff as well that's happening, it's a new kind of space that's opened up. While you had the air, land, and sea, but here is cyberspace, and that's a new kind of space with new kind of attentions that will have to be devoted by all stakeholders in this part, right? And now, with regard to 5G, sometimes we grapple with why is 5G so important, and what is it that 5G will enable a country to do? Now, let us look at what the global scenario of 5G is. Now, most of the countries who have deployed 5G networks, now if you see, the leading country was, let's say, South Korea, Japan, some Scandinavian countries, United States doing a lot of catching up. The fact is that what 5G does in engineering terms, simple engineering terms, is when efficiency is equal to output by input, 5G will enable your input costs to go down. And therefore, efficiency of a country across a variety of the energies and efforts that it puts, excuse me, will be facilitated if you use 5G technologies. And today we'll try and see how the 5G technologies will particularly facilitate, enterprises, or what is, often touted as Industry 4.0. With that, I have the privilege of now requesting, my colleague on the panel, a very good panel we've got with Mr. Rohit, as was mentioned, from Cisco, and of course, Mr. Golok Kumar, who is from the Ministry of External Affairs. So Rohit, I turn to you first. As I just mentioned, telecom has emerged as the backbone of the economy. And then as enterprises move towards more automation and Industry 4.0, what role do you see for telcos to facilitate this digital transformation? Rohit.
Thanks, Vikram, and thanks, Cyber Media, for having this. Indeed, a very relevant question, Vikram. I think there is no denying the fact that over the last 1 year, I think everybody has understood the importance of telecom and the connectivity services that it brings. I think we have survived, in some pockets also thrived because of the seamless connectivity, and we were able to bridge the physical to virtual divide that COVID forced upon us. And as we get into 5G, I think the business resiliency and the network being always there will be taken as an as a for granted fact. And with some of the use cases that you mentioned, right, whether it is industry, whether it is automation, whether it is edge, I think that together we do anticipate that it will have the fourth industry revolution in India. And to give you some perspective of what that means, for India, with government aiming for 5 trillion, and most analysts predicting that we will hit at least 4 trillion, GDP. That means that you will have cities and urban areas in India that will have the same GDP as of countries. NCR is slated to have the same GDP as that of Philippines. Mumbai is going to be as big as Malaysia, right? There will be Ahmedabad, Bangalore. So there are a lot of urban areas that will be as big as the smaller ASEAN country GDP, right? And this will only be possible if the 5G services that we are all hoping for is going to create that efficiency that will help us reduce our cost and increase our global competitiveness. And that is what the use cases. I think it's all 5G is all about use cases. If 3G, 4G was about connectivity, 5G is all going to be about use cases. And these are the use cases that will unlock the 4 trillion or the fourth industrial revolution in India. And telecoms will have central and right in the center kind of a role in this. And even for them, it's going to be a shift both in terms of how they've traditionally built their networks, run their networks, and more importantly, it will be a shift in terms of the services that they will be able to offer. So today, most of the service providers offer either consumer services, and then you see some percentage of enterprise services. Now, with 5G, with industrial 4.0 use cases that you spoke about, you will see there will be an equally strong pillar of revenue, which will be in terms of the vertical solutions that we're talking about, whether it is agriculture, whether it is retail, whether it is manufacturing. So all of these sectors together, telecom and 5G connectivity with the promise of ultra low latency, huge bandwidth, and unimaginable scale will unlock. Vikram.
Thank you so much, Rohit. I think that's a very important case. So, at least for telcos, this is going to be a big opportunity, because in the last, decade or so, sometime that the telecom companies were top of the, international S&P, grouping. But globally, the telcos have been losing revenues, and a lot has to do with the rise of the internet companies. Right, when you call the FANG companies, or the monetization model of the internet companies were the monetization model of the telcos. So thanks for highlighting, Rohit, that this is a great opportunity that 5G presents for opening up new revenue streams for the telcos themselves. And at least as COAI members, we see all our members are already, they are not just telecom service providers, but digital services providers. It's providing digital services across a spectrum and across a range. And particularly the enterprise segment within telcos has a great opportunity now to design the use cases, as you say. So we'll dwell a little more on that. But thanks, yes, the telcos have a great opportunity. With that, I'll turn to you, Golok. Is that, everybody's citing that 5G as a technology will be a game changer in many ways. And you being within the, Ministry of External Affairs, I'm sure are seeing, even the interplay of different countries as well. But in your opinion, how will it impact enterprises, manufacturing, services, and of course the government sector? Over to you, Golok.
Very good evening, Vikramji. Let me also greet my other co-panelist, Rohit ji. Let me also thank Cyber Media and their team for inviting me to speak in this forum. Now, coming back to Vikramji, I find 5G. Let me also add into it saying that 5G, along with the emerging tech era we have, now that will be as a game changer for not only the people but business at large, and also find society at large. Sitting on the government side of it, what we can realize. Uh, imagine the billion and billion connected devices we have together. They are kind of a generating a real time kind of or gathering a real time of data and information, and sharing those information among themselves to avert an accident which is about to happen, and which may be possible once we have 5G in place. Imagine a life-saving kind of applications which is again developed in a this kind of emerging technology, which is able to save life of a remote corner in a village through providing help, diagnostic help, and other help, the expert help on a real-time basis, that too on a remote corner of a village. Again, probably it will be feasible and possible through this kind of a 5G technology, right? Imagine some criminal activities if we can protect before it happens. Imagine that. So at the same time, also imagine we are every day talking about the cyber space. There are a lot of digital assets we need to protect, not only within the government sector but also public sector, private sector at large. And imagine we can collaborate information in terms of averting a cyber attack between the stakeholders, among the states, among the countries, and if you can avert a cyber attack on a real-time basis. Again, this is probably possible after emergence of this 5G technology, cellular networks, as well as I said, the emerging technology era. But especially, Vikramji, I find three areas which will be largely impacted after the 5G, along with Industry 4.0 is into the picture. The first and foremost area which will be mostly impacted is the way the society, we can name them as a smart society. How do we create a smart society to live with? For an example, imagine that the electricity grid, which is generating let's say today, X amount of carbon footprint. Can I reduce that carbon footprint for that smart society with the help of the 5G network? Can I use this drone kind of a technology to avail or to provide a government facility into a disaster scenario? Example, let's say Uttarakhand, we have witnessed a scenario of this kind of a natural disaster. Can you provide this kind of a drone-enabled technology where this kind of a backup, this kind of a other enablement can be taken into that particular disaster site, probably even before the disaster happens. Now, this kind of prediction, I personally feel, once the 5G is with us along with Industry 4.0, and as I rightly said, if we can use 5G with the emerging technology, whether it is a power of AI, whether it is a power of cloud, whether it is a power of IoT, if we can combine and collaborate, and if we can create a next level of experience for the society at large, which is I'm very optimistic, think things will happen. The second area, if I talk about the industry side of it, I again see it will kind of a completely transform the industries in terms of automation towards the industry, in terms of meeting the supply demand chain, right? In terms of let's say some logistic company transporting some good from place A to place B, and imagine that place B is impacted with, for an example, some COVID scenario. 5G can predict me saying that no, the logistic has to not to be supplied at place B, but the logistic needed at some other place. So this kind of supply chain, this kind of industrial automation in the form of 5G and the industry 4.0, you'll see that there will be major change happening on the industry sector as well. And the third is naturally in terms of, we say, virtual reality, augment reality, AR, VR space. As a human being, probably I'll be able to predict many things sitting at my office, what is happening at my home, or the vice versa. My family might be coming to know what is that I'm doing in the office, or maybe is that today I'll be late, let's say 8 p.m. I need not call them over a phone. My family might be knowing that, right? So that may be possible, time to come. And in a real-time scenario, for an example, I can do a lot of, I'll say resource planning, I'll say resource optimization. Let me give a very small example. Today, let's say I have in my Passport Seva program, the government employees, the strength is around 2,500. And frankly speaking, I need another almost 1,000 odd officers to deal with the kind of a passport volume, to deal with the kind of citizens' expectation and demand, and also to give a next level of citizen experience, which we always say. But can I augment the same manpower in terms of productivity, in terms of efficiency, in terms of giving the same better citizen experience with the same manpower? Probably yes. Because why? I may not be able to transfer from place A to B, but I can take the same work sitting at the same place of another location, and which I am doing, in fact, which I am doing. But enablement of 5G will help me to do in a better way. For an example, while I using we do police verification for the applicants, when somebody apply for a passport. Recently, I launched a mobile app. Just what happened? Just imagine. After launch of the mobile app, I could immediately start operationalization of the mobile app. Almost all the cities, metros, even semi-urban. But while I was trying to utilize that mobile app at the remote and other corner of the country, there was no internet available for me. Now imagine the same mobile app, can I give the same experience even if a citizen is residing at any remote corner of the village? Why can't I give the same experience to the a person living at the remote corner of the village, right? And again, as I said, this kind of technology coming to us, 5G, along with industry 4.0 and the emerging technology, as I said, taking help of cloud or maybe other offline method, probably I can achieve that, right? So I see a lot of potential, Vikramji, coming forward when we talk about 5G. But and saying that the 5G will help us to collaborate more. The 5G will help us to create the ecosystem, which probably in government we are not trying to give the impact of an ecosystem. Still I feel whatever we're doing as a Passport Seva program, or there is a GSTN, or there is a income tax, is a program doing wonder, no doubt. But can I give a collaborative impact not only to my citizens, but also to my business community and other stakeholders as well? And probably that is, I am thinking it is very much possible once we go into that particular area. Thank you.
Well, thank you. These are lovely points, actually. One of the things while you were mentioning about collaboration and digital assets. So, yeah. And since you are, heading up the Passport Seva project, tell me, with 5G networks available, the power of computing would be available significantly. Now, two parts. One is that the government itself is the biggest repository and holder of data, starting from the municipal level to the state level to the central level, and if you combine the PSUs, etc. And with the privacy data bill in Parliament, right? So, what do you see as a potential that while even 4G, forget 5G, even 4G networks today allow you to move that data, and there's a huge cloud services or cloud infrastructure being set up in India, both public private cloud. Now, your thoughts on how can you, as you mentioned, the ecosystem in the government to utilize the existing data sets at various levels, maybe anonymize them suitably to help in the prediction, to avoid, one is avoidance of incidents, the other is provision of, services. So your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think this is one of my favorite area. I always speak, Vikramji, saying that yes, no, even the 5G era will witness that it will be majorly it will be data driven. And when we say data driven, there are 2 points. I always say that whenever we enable these kind of a digital adoptions within the government setup or between government and industry or between stakeholders, the point here is, do we really understand the data sets? That is very important to note here. Most of the time, at least what I have experienced is, I or will say the department or the industry at large, we don't understand our data sets well, our data points well. So that is the first point to start with, saying that, do I really understand my data? Now let me take little deeper. When I say, do I really understand my data, I divide it into two segments. One is, do I understand right from ingestion to insight what is happening with the data, right? The second segment is, do I really understand what kind of data I am dealing with? Is it a fiduciary data? Is it a configurable data? Is it a public data? So do I really understand the data by itself, right? Which is again, many a time I find it is missing. Now, once I understand these two factors well, then the third very important area is, how do I drive this data? That I call, do I have at least a simplistic data governance model? Many and major of us, we don't have a holistic data governance approach or the holistic data governance model available with us, neither within the ministry or department itself or between ministry and among ourselves, right? So unless we have a structure way of dealing the data, including, as I said, the classifications, the data sets, and also having a good data governance model to deal with, then only probably not only you will be able to fully leverage the potential of data, but also at the same time, probably you are hinting me saying that, am I missing somewhere in terms of compliances, in terms of regulation, in terms of privacy of protection of personal data, right? And I will only be able to achieve that provided I have these 3 things in place. I must understand my data well. I must also categorize my data set well. And then accordingly, you build around a data governance model, and that data governance model must have, I typically divide into 4 quadrants. The first quadrant is the people. Who are the people? I mean, who is the creator of the data? Who is the owner of the data? Who is the custodian of the data? How is that the data I am collecting is storing at rest? How is that the data I am collecting and storing at rest is sharing with the third party agencies apart from me, right? So that is the people part. The second is, I say, execution model. And when I say the second quadrant is the execution model, how is that the data I have collected and the data I am governing, the model is working? No, is it a centralized model? Is it a federated model? For an example, in Passport Seva, I have taken a centralized approach. May not be necessarily somebody should go with a centralized approach, but that's what my requirement, the way I will handle the data, right? So the execution model. I have also gone with a PPP model. That means the sovereign data is handled by our officers, sovereign functions are handled by our officers, but the non-sovereign part of the functions is handled by my PPP partner, right? So that's the model I have taken. The third quadrant is, I always say that, do I really understand the rules of engagement? And rules of engagement is nothing but the compliances, the laws of the land, the legal side of it. No, whatever we have available today, even if the personal data protection bill is still in parliament, but whatever laws of the land we have today, is that I am missing something there. And last but not the least, probably Rohit ji will be very interested to see there, saying that the tools and technologies I am deploying. So these four quadrants, if I am driving the data with these four quadrants defined well, adhered well, and kind of a practicing well, I don't foresee saying that the leveraging the potential of the data or making a data-driven kind of a business call becomes a difficult thing, which probably I am doing. So that's how I'll put it, Vikram.
Thank you, Golok. While I'll turn to Rohit, but let me leave you with a poser, because you are such an expert on the Passport Seva project. What comes to my mind is, there is this discussion about linking the COVID certificate to a passport, right? So some thoughts on that. And the other is, why can I not use DLT for passports, right? So some thoughts on that when we come back, because you'll have the networks, you'll have the compute, you will have the technology. How can we make that part more efficient, right? So Rohit, I'll turn to you now. Some very interesting points that Golok put. Essentially you have this variety of data sets, and as he nicely puts it in the four quadrants. Essentially, in an industry 4.0 or in a 5G, basically we have to be able to make the data available sweat some more. How do we make the data sweat some more? And what do you think? What kind of applications or workloads would nudge enterprises in India towards, one is 5G, and obviously, that would lead to which verticals would be early adopters and would see more benefit in using 5G and related technologies. Rohit.
Thanks, Vikram. So indeed, very, very, relevant point that that you made. I think we all know we live in an instant gratification world, right? Everything is, this is the touch, age of the touch generation. Everything has to be at a touch of a button. So definitely, treating data where it is, created, right? Putting those rules in place so that data is processed and questionable, actionable information is then taken out, right? Because you can have all the data in the world, but unless you take out real meaningful intelligence from it, it is of no use, right? So definitely we see that instant gratification is going to be the new norm when it comes to data consumption, creation, and also the processing of of data. And that's where, if you see all the technology evolution that has led us here, is pointing out to a more edge kind of deployment for for 5G, right? So with edge, I think we will have those capabilities that the industry would need in order to instantly gratify data, right? Whether it is from a consumption perspective, processing, and then monetization perspective. And I would say, if you see 5G, right, in terms of the use cases that it unlocks across enhanced mobile broadband or low latency or massive IoT, right? I would say we have 4 key buckets, right? If I had to bucketize it. One, the first and foremost use case, especially for India, given how fiber starved we are, is fixed wireless access. So the thought of having a bigger, fatter pipe with lower latency is definitely mouth-watering, both as a consumer of such services and also as as part of the industry. The second bucket is, how do I kind of use these foundational technologies to provide an immersive experience? And when I say immersive experience, what it translates to the use cases on augmented reality side or virtual reality side, right? The third bucket is around real-time video monitoring and collaboration. So you want to see it as it happens, right? You want to put data analytics on top of it, take out questionable and actionable intelligence in real time, and then give it back to to the responders who are dealing with that use case. The fourth bucket is around connected machinery and equipment. Right now, if I was to double click on on each one of them and really call out what does it mean for for India and generally in the industry ecosystem. So first and foremost, right, which touches each one of us is public safety and security. I think the possibilities that 5G unlocks in public safety and security is immense. So whether it is day-to-day police operations, for example, maintenance of law and order, right, traffic management, road accidents, you can real-time transfer video file from a site of accidents to a central control room, and then central control room can can direct this. This becomes even more important when, let's say, police or law enforcement agencies are responding to a riot, right? So they can actually people seniors sitting in the control room can see real time what is happening. And then if you build in, let's say, facial recognition in real time, right? Let's say a policeman has a helmet mounted camera which is streaming real time images into a central data analytics engine, which is then doing facial recognition, and it is actually pointing out to the policeman on the ground that, look, this guy is has a history of, let's say, antisocial behavior and has a long history. Then you can accordingly modify your response. Golok mentioned about natural disasters. We've seen that in natural disasters, connectivity is the first thing that everybody looks forward to, and often in a disaster zone, connectivity, because of the sheer number of people that go in, the sheer number of machinery that goes in, we've seen people struggle with basic connectivity. So to be able to give dedicated bandwidth, right, to be able to have a deterministic service will greatly enable our response in a much better way and a much faster way for responding to such natural calamities. Right. The second one is of course around transportation. So we were discussing with the Department of Railways around how they can provide fast internet connectivity on high-speed trains. Right? They want to give the same browsing experience inside their fast-moving trains, which are touching 150 kilometers per hour or 200 kilometers or even 250 kilometers an hour. So how do we enable those use cases? Again, one of the things that they said again was in a natural disaster, how do I maintain a steady line with with my control center? Maybe have a mobile railway van, which is sort of a private network that gets rolled out. All my first responders, everybody who's working to provide help during the disaster response, is actually able to leverage that connectivity and be able to offer expert advice. On transportation again, right? We've seen in airports, we saw that with COVID, right? The amount of freight uplifting that airline industry did. We've seen that the airport in an airport, right? Aircraft turnaround time, right? The processes really dictates how profitable that flight is, both for the airlines as well as for the Airtel operator and the airport operator. And there is so much of data that gets uploaded once a flight lands to getting it ready, doing the pre-checks, post-checks, making sure all the baggage is uploaded, all the processes, everybody is on board, everything is followed. So all that data processing, all that real-time data, whether you are in the apron, right, whether you are in the taxi, or whether you are maybe 2 floors or 3 floors down in an airport control center, to be able to give that seamless connectivity is going to be a game changer for them to turn around their the aircrafts that come in, give a better experience to all the travelers that use that facility. Even while we've seen in COVID times some of those touchless and contactless airport check-in, facial recognition being used for boarding, right? So all of those were actually hastened with COVID. Similarly, we have use cases that are there in defense, right? If a soldier is operating in a forward area, just the amount of analytics or ground situation that you can pick up and relay it back to the commanding officer for him to then direct his troops, monitoring of borders, right? So those are very, very significant use cases that we are seeing are making for increasingly interesting conversations with each of these departments, whether it is in the government or whether it is in the public sector. We are also talking to mining players, for example, right, for asset tracking, right? Those are the biggest assets that they have, whether it is human, whether it is machinery. So how do they track those assets in real time? How do they make an autonomous vehicle operate in a hazardous condition without endangering human lives? And those are some of the questions that we are now trying to solve. And if you see, once the ecosystem comes together, right, to make these use cases work seamlessly across connectivity, across software, across devices, right, I think that is when you will see the mass adoption happening. But surely, I think with the use cases that I just spoke about, that we have been discussing with the various stakeholders in industry, we do see that there is an increasing awareness, and a plan is being found by most of these organizations in harnessing some of the benefits that 5G will bring to fore. Vikram, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I get it. We keep telling the others, but sometimes you get caught up with this unmute stuff, right? So thank you very much for some of these illustrative use cases. Personally, I've seen some of the early use cases which have a great potential, at least for us in India, is, let me cite a couple of examples. This T20, right? T20 or World Cup. So it's a cricket crazy country, and now you have a football league going. So many of the stadiums per se, now the stadiums are not occupied all the time, but by the time you put a combination of an effort, and if digital services provider in collaboration with let's say the sports federation hosting these. And I saw in Germany, we were there for a 5D meeting, and one of the OEMs demonstrated that in the stadium, they deployed small cells using drones. So one is a small cell, right? Second is a drone. You don't need to have the small cell there all the time. The day you have a big match, you put it there, right? And then there was this good demonstration that, when a goal is scored, so typically everybody flips out his camera and, wants to record that moment. So what happens is, in that segment of the stadium, you suddenly have a surge in demand. So, with network slicing, you can, potentially cater to that demand. Then there was another demonstration which was quite interesting, which was that if there is a fire incident or some incident in that stadium, for example, right? Then obviously the first responders are the people who want very quick, access to that, or the real-time situation. And as you said, with facial recognition or video surveillance. So you have video surveillance combined by transportation of the video data and with analytics to analyze it and give it a response. So for India particularly, let's say what comes to my mind is a very good use cases in some of these stadiums, because it'll be a great combination of digital service providers plus, sports lovers, the companies which is organizing it, plus the audience, which is citizens. So That was one. And another one which I heard was very interesting. India is, I think, probably the largest producer of milk in the world. Now, what happens is by the time you do right from growing the cattle feed to the cattle producing the milk, to transportation of milk, to the selling of milk itself, or converting the milk into a food processed and retail. This entire chain, using a variety and a mix of the 5G technologies, right, to use this data, can significantly enhance India's efficiencies by lowering costs and more milk, better health, and a variety of good use cases. So I thought I just, for our viewers, I would cite these two examples as some really great potential for early adoption and in an industry 4.0 scenario. We are also given to understand some of the private folks, in big cement factories or refineries and automobile plants. So there are already some discussions that application of either a private network, which is captive, for enhancing the automation in the network, is a potential very good use case. And you of course cited fixed wireless access. Yes, globally, wherever networks have been deployed, one of the service which is in great demand, I mean, just you can't dig up Connaught Place or Dharavi and lay fiber, to deliver the kind of bandwidths that have to be delivered. You'll need fiber in the air. So the E and V band spectrum, equivalent of fiber in the air, because India's towers are very barely about 25-30% are fiberized. Now, if you do not fiberize, 5G is not going to happen. In fact, even 4G, we are having severe challenges. So one of the things that we have is a big discussion and a demand or a request to the government is early release of these spectrum bands, which will actually, facilitate the 5G deployment in the country. Because without adequate spectrum, both for coverage and capacity, now the recent spectrum auctions last, maybe 2 or 3 weeks back, basically what is going to happen is it will boost up India's, let's say, bandwidth abilities. Today, we have average bandwidth is around 13 Mbps per user, whereas the National Digital Communication Policy itself says by 2022, this should be 50 Mbps. So to get to 50 Mbps, there are only two things that have to happen. You have to get the spectrum, and you have to get more, towers in place. And of course, you have to get towers fiberized. So these are big challenges that one needs to overcome as a country to get 5G in place. But thank you very much for citing some of these very interesting, connected machines, real-time video monitoring, and all. A very good use of 5G and 5G related technologies. So now I come back to you, Golokji. Is your thoughts on how do you connect up health certificates with the passport as and when they're required, and the other is there a potential to use digital distributed ledger technologies, DLT, in the management of passport? And there's already a global sharing of passport data, right? So is there interest in countries but to use this 5G related technology and compute power for a new stack?
Thank you, Vikramji. I again absolutely find a lot of value chain on the DLT technology, especially if I say the power of blockchain.
Yes.
Let me again give some practical example here, saying that when I grant a passport, I trigger for a police verification call. Now, when I trigger for a police verification call, if I see the policing ecosystem in the state, they have various databases to verify it, including criminal antecedent, citizenship angle, other angle. There are various angles they verify. And I have personally come across saying that all police across the state, they have their own application to deal with that part of the verification. However, I share the base data. Okay, hey, here is the application for Golok is I'm sending to you. giving some basic data to them, including the photograph, and that's it. Now, when I pass this small data set to the police authorities, I personally feel saying that once I pass the data, there has to be one edge, which anyway now I am handling centrally through a central application. I personally feel let me also use the power of the application which police authorities have developed, right? Now there are two ways. Either I develop some APIs and pass the data to the police application, which probably I am doing as of now. The other way is, can I pass this simple data set to the police authorities in a way so that nobody is in a way in terms of the personal protection of that data set which I am passing it to the police authorities, nobody should be able to tamper with in between. Not only that, in terms of privacy of the data, nobody else should be able to do anything with the privacy except that the authorized the access of the police user who is accessing that data set from me. Now, can I distribute the data set in such a way that while my officer at the passport office is also working on that police verification application part of the application, at the same time, police authority is working on their part of the verification of the application. Both are working on the same file without knowing who is doing what, without divulging what I am doing and what they are doing. I am not aware of, completely away from each other. However, when it comes to the final report submission, my officer gets the final reports from the police authorities saying that rest part they have taken care. Final report has come to me, whether it is adverse or clear, but nobody is aware of what has happened in which node of the blockchain, right? At the same time, assume that a cyber attack has happened on a particular node in a particular Thana which is dealing from that particular blockchain node. Probably I can avert that cyber attack call in that node itself and zero it down. I'll not allow you to expand it further. And reaching up to my data center, probably today they can, because I'm handling through a central application. You are directly can reach up to my perimeter layer at least in the data center. So one is this kind of DLT will help me to secure the privacy of the personal data. It will also allow me to access, transact, and edit at the same time on the same file by multiple actors. And then if in terms of protection and security of that particular data set, I can avert that attack or let's say some malicious thing happening on that file and zero it down and sanitize at that particular node itself. So these kind of things I am again working in Passport Seva, and I find many of such government application will work on those directions. The second important aspect, I find probably Vikramji, you are giving an example saying that when it comes to giving the same experience, whether it is a Passport Seva, whether it is a digital, health sector, whether it is a agricultural sector, because of today's problem in the way the bandwidth is being delivered and delivered in a city on a different fashion, in a remote corner on a different fashion, availability of the bandwidth, the reliability of the bandwidth, the resilience of the bandwidth. I'm not only kind of a differentiating between my own citizens, saying that okay, if you are living on a city, I can give you a better experience than a person living on a remote corner of the village. Can I omit that gap in terms of digital divide, in terms of let's say pushing some content or contest in terms of educating that person living at the remote corner of the village or any rural areas? So these gaps, again, I find 5G will have a lot of potential to bridge these gaps and probably bringing those left off or silos, or I'll say bringing those people who into the mainstream. That is another very big area which I find very useful. The last thing I'd also like to point here, saying that while we will be going ahead with this emerging era, 5G, industry 4.0, emerging technology, I always say that, whether it is a ministry, whether it is a public sector, whether it is a government, industry, academia, every one of us, I categorize them into 5 Ws, and these 5 Ws are nothing but first W is I say that I must understand my workload. What kind of workload I am dealing with? Who is the stakeholders, or who is the beneficiary for that workload which I am trying to cater for? And there, if I understand well, I'll be able to catalyze and leverage this 5G very well if I understand my workload well. The second thing I always say is the workforce. What kind of workforce I am dealing with, whether it is an internal, whether it is external, whether it is a stakeholder, citizen at large, beneficiary at large. Do I really understand my workforce? The third W, I always say that, do I really understand my workflow? That is the application. Do I really understand my application? What kind of application I am dealing with? And probably Rohit ji was trying to express there, saying that no, there will be a lot of variation, mix and match of these kind of applications. We will see that emerging and collaborating together. The fourth W, I always say, is the workplace. And after the COVID scenario, Vikramji, we have experienced that there are a lot of kind of a realignment. There are a lot of kind of a re-strategizing of not only the workforce, the cultural shift, the training and capacity building. So the workplace now, it is very playing a very important role after this COVID scenario. So workplace, how do I deal with that workplace? And the third is the I always say the fifth is I always say the web. And web is nothing but the content and context I am dealing with. Any sector, whether it is a passport, whether it is a income tax, agriculture, health. So if I understand these 4 Ws, 5 Ws well, and if I also in a way able to map it towards this emerging technology, 5G, industry 4.0, again, I personally feel that there will be a lot of potential. You'll see that industry, academia, government emerging together and kind of giving a next level of experience not only to the citizen and beneficiary, but also corporate houses, business, and much more. So that's how I put it, Vikramji. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Golokji. This is very interesting. I would only like to, dwell on the fact you mentioned a couple of times in both your interjections was, okay, in rural areas or in unconnected areas, you need to get better connectivity. From the telecom service providers part, let me tell you, we are very keen to do that from the industry side. The constraining parts is that they, the government making available adequate spectrum in time, an annual spectrum roadmap, so that you can plan how much spectrum. And 5G is completely about spectrum and a right of way to install the telecom infrastructure. In fact, we made recommendations to the government. One is to streamline the right of way permissions across states, because it's very unfortunate that most states, local bodies look at telecom as revenue. Take out as much money up front as you can, whether it's related spectrum or right of way. So the impact of that is that the capex available to invest in the network gets stymied a little. But since you're with the government, I would really encourage you to, when there is a TRAI consultation or an open house, please demand that. Demand spectrum, because the spectrum is a public asset. And if any spectrum, any public asset, and particularly like spectrum, if it is not utilized at this instance, that value of that is kind of, lost. So the health department or the education department or the transportation or the smart cities must actually go and participate in the TRAI open house and say, please give more spectrum up for auctions. Right?
So, even the agriculture sector, yes.
Everybody, like Rohit indicated, it is about 5G for a country. It's all about use cases, and the use cases are different verticals. So it is a bit unfortunate that the telcos get branded or are publicly perceived as the ones who want the spectrum. Actually, the spectrum is demanded for all.
It's other way. It's other way actually.
Yes. So I think a public discourse as to wanting that is important. We are really out of time, but before I kind of wind up the session, I think one thing is very important, and it did get mentioned somewhat earlier, was there will be a lot of creation of digital assets, both at the public, private, and individual level. So, Rohit, how do you, some thoughts on how to safeguard these digital assets as we go? Right? Yeah. Over to you, Rohit.
Thanks. Vikram, I couldn't have, picked up a more relevant question to kind of, wrap this up, right? I think any digitization, any adoption of technology has to keep the fundamental, aspect of security in place, right, before they go mass scale. And as you rightly called out, right, 5G is going to lead to an exponential increase in the number of digital assets that the country will have. So the service providers' digital assets will also go, many-fold. And because of the distributed nature of 5G, you will have a much, wider footprint that you could ever anticipate in 4G. So the service provider environment definitely is going to have exponential growth in their digital assets. Now, when it comes to consumer, as a consumer, 2 years ago, I used to have maybe 1 or 2 devices, connected at my home. Today, I have 12. Right, so every person has, on an average, right, when school's running, my son is giving me tough competition in the number of connected devices he has. So I think even at home, if you see, right, all of these assets that were supposedly just static assets are now interactive assets, right? So they can talk to each other, they can talk to some cloud service. So you see the increase of digital assets even at home is increasing, right? Then we spoke about the industry 4.0 use case. Today a factory machine turning out a finished product is again a static producer, right? Once it becomes IoTized, right, once it has a sensor, once you track it, or if it is a truck, right, that goes to deliver, maybe pick up fresh produce, deliver to the market, right? Once you do all of that, include all of that as a digital asset, you see that everything and, almost, all the assets that you will use in your personal life, in your, work life, or even, from a public, asset perspective is going to be digitalized, right? And the most fundamental thing is that going to be, how are you going to protect these assets? So a thorough security framework needs to be in place that covers, right, some of the points that government has been talking about when it comes to trust. It should also cover the infrastructure that the telecom operators are going to use to set up those those networks. That even applies to enterprises or government bodies, right? Golok mentioned agriculture, right? If agriculture tomorrow has their own private network, or police has their own private network replacing the Tetra legacy network that they use, guess what? Security is going to be top of mind, right? Which comes to the assets that will be used to roll out that network. And once that network is ready, how do you protect the data that is flowing in that network, right? So that the assets are fully secured. There is very or no chance of those getting compromised. And consumer data, right? Network data, electronic, right? The organization asset data is not compromised, and is the sanity is maintained. Of course, this is going to require an industry effort, and regulators, government of India is also going to play a big role along with COI. So definitely we feel security is going to be top of mind for this. Now, along with technology, right? I often say that big transformations are not just about technology, right? So there is an equal amount of effort and work that is required to also upgrade our skill set. So our average engineer skill set, managers skill set, they all have to get upgraded to be more programmable and to be more tuned with with the use cases that we are setting. And of course, with technology and people skill set, your processes also need to keep pace, right? So because this transition is not just about technology, right? It is about use cases. It is about fundamentally how we do things today, and it is about people and and processes.
Hey, Rohit, thanks a ton. I think this has been a great conversation. So to the point about, skill sets, I'm happy to share with the panelists and with the audience that we at COAI just a month back, in collaboration with Nokia and NIIT, have launched a 5G certification program. So those people who want to actually, get a certification, it's something similar to your CCNA. Type of and it's with Nokia Bell Labs. So one would really encourage many of the government people or all the people attending this program to examine if they want to get a 5G certification to upgrade their skill sets and be ready for the 5G.
In fact, I just wanted to add, we do have a network academy with BSNL, right? So this is an online academy that a lot of people can take advantage of to upgrade their skills.
Super. Hey guys, so thanks a ton, Rohit. It's been marvelous speaking to you, and Golok ji, so wonderful, and you put things in such a clear and simple perspective. I'm sure the audience that is tuned in would have benefited from this discussion about how 5G would help enterprises and 4.0. So thank you very much, Golok ji. Thank you, Rohit, and thanks.